Howdy, friends, and welcome back to the show. My guest today is Peyton Elroy, the first female guest on the Tyro experience. So I'm super stoked to get this one out there. We discuss a lot of things. There's a 2.5+ hour conversation. We talk about whether or not we have multiple lives, why it's a woman's job to be beautiful and a man's to be strong, 14-day fast experience that Peyton just completed recently, and a whole lot more. It was a real honor to sit down with her. She's a wealth of knowledge and very insightful. So I hope y'all enjoy. Peyton, thank you for coming on. I appreciate you being here.
Yes, absolutely. It's definitely an honor.
Yeah, likewise. And we're having some technical difficulties, but no problem. That's the beauty of podcasts. It's predominantly audio anyway, so I'm excited to have a conversation with you. I've been following for probably the better part of a year, and recently, like within the last 6 months, I got Twitter, so started following you on Twitter as well. And I think it's always interesting to see the difference between people, or at least like your perception of people, because obviously I haven't met you.
Mm-hmm.
Twitter is much different than Instagram, because it's as you know. So it's interesting to see that difference, and I think the way that you use Twitter is you articulate. I don't know. It's just more articulation. It's more thought instead of visual. So I wanted to say that I appreciate what you do and the message that you send on both of them, but specifically Twitter. I think it's really unique, and we need more of it.
Oh, thank you so much. That is really special because I think I've actually had my Twitter a lot longer than my Instagram. I got Twitter when I was 12 years old.
Oh, no way.
What business did I have on Twitter at 12 years old? I'm not sure, but as Nolan and I were speaking of, for the audience who wasn't here, before we started, I was telling him that I kind of feel like a boomer when it comes to technology at this point, because I used to be so ahead, as I'm alluding to with Twitter. I wanted to have all the apps. I wanted to know everything about technology because it was so new. And I'm grateful that I grew up not having social media or not having the TV or anything as the center of my attention. And so anyway, I wanted to be ahead, and then as I've gotten older, I've dipped off of that. I've actually kind of rejected technology in a lot of ways. So it's nice that kind of circling back to what you just said, it's nice that my presence on Twitter has been appreciated because I've definitely put in work and figured out my own way of using it. I think everyone who has an account and some kind of audience has their own unique way of using their audience and using the way that they write or post, and I think I found mine, so it feels good. And you had said that you're new or newer to Twitter, about 6 months, so how are you enjoying it so far?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the uniqueness part, because I would add a caveat to that. I think the good accounts do. I think many people use Twitter, even some popular Twitter accounts, in my opinion, do not have a unique voice. They kind of regurgitate
Oh, yes.
similar ideas,
Okay,
information
true.
in a really almost copycat type way, and that's not really the people that I follow or interested in. I've actually
Mm-hmm.
tried to cull those people. I've started following people, realized not really interested in what you're saying, but for that exact reason. So, but I've really enjoyed it because, like I mentioned, it's more, you can fool people on Instagram and TikTok through visuals and like kind of just the attention grab of it all, but you,
Mm-hmm.
over a long enough time horizon, you cannot fool people on Twitter for the exact reason that it is literally your thoughts.
Oh,
So
yeah.
you can't like continually articulate your thoughts over a long enough time horizon to fool people on Twitter, specifically those in what I call the esoteric Twitter, because Noah Ryan was actually speaking to me about this. He kind of referred to it as like everybody checks each other, and I kind of alluded to it
Mm,
being a self-cleaning oven. Like the frauds get found out. So I enjoy it though. I enjoy it
yeah.
more than Instagram and more than YouTube, more than, I don't have TikTok, never will. Um, yeah, that's my line in the sand.
Wow, okay. Well, I can probably assume, but I'd like to hear in your words why you'll never have TikTok.
You know, it's interesting because I use Instagram Reels, but something about TikTok is just diabolical to me. I know that Instagram Reels is the exact same,
Mm,
but I'm just not a fan. I can't get behind the Chinese ownership either.
mhm.
I firmly believe there's some sketchy business going on there. I don't know exactly what it is, but I just get an uneasy feeling intuitively. So I choose and will choose to follow that intuition. You know, it's funny.
Absolutely.
Told people I'm starting a podcast back in the day and all these things. They're like, you should start a TikTok, and I was like, nope, nope. But that was the advice that everybody gave me. They're like, start a TikTok. I'm like, nope.
Yeah, I will say that I've seen, not with my own account, but I've seen with people close to me that it is a very, very fast way to spread knowledge, or it doesn't even have to be knowledge, but your brand or your account. It's very easy to go viral, at least in the beginning, because I think that's the way that they kind of hook you. They favor new accounts and new videos. You'll get a bunch of views and interactions, and then you'll be like, oh my gosh. Like, that's how they make you feel like you should keep using it, because they give you kind of an immediate success rate. But I completely resonate with what you said, kind of giving you an uneasy feeling. And I've even noticed that I think whatever technology they have is probably the most advanced built in, because I kid you not, I have TikTok and I'll use it as a way to understand the way that people think. So I don't use my account in the way that I use my Instagram or my Twitter, to where I'm actively posting and I have a goal or anything like that. I'm really just on there as more of an observer at this point in time. And there will be videos that come up that, in explicit detail, relay a thought that I'm having. So I know that people are sketched out about your microphone being on and different ads popping up on different apps that are in relation to maybe a conversation you had with a friend, and oh, like they're listening, that's why these ads are coming up. Well, what about when I'm not speaking at all on these very particular things and it's just coming up? And I actually think on Twitter I saw someone talk about this within the last couple of months. There's a really amazing account. I don't know if you've seen it. Deja Rue 22. Have you seen?
Mm-mm.
No, you haven't. Okay. I've known him for a couple of years now, being on Twitter, and he had responded to this tweet where someone was questioning exactly what I was talking about. Like, how on TikTok are they now showing videos that I'm not even talking about, but just thinking about? And he had shared something to where there's like, like I don't know, somehow your thoughts can be read, apparently.
I feel like it has to do with pattern. Not to interject. Sorry. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
no, that's okay. No, I want to hear what you have to say.
I feel like it has to do with pattern recognition and the algorithm being so complex and having the amount of data points that these algorithms have. I believe it to be like an astronomical number that human beings aren't even capable of, like,
Mm,
conceiving. So I think it has to do with like this is all conjecture in my mind, but what post did you like? What did you search? How quickly did you like a post after viewing it?
yeah.
How quickly did you move on? How many times did you rewatch it? Did you look at comments? What comments did you stay on longer? I think all that stuff is measured, because then that's how they
Mm,
get you to that exact point. And I think a lot of people might not even have the awareness to realize that they're being shown videos that they're actually thinking about. But I totally align with that. I think that's a real
hmm.
thing. Are you familiar? I'm assuming, from what little I know about you, that you did not play Call of Duty growing up.
Correct. I did not
Okay.
play Call of Duty.
Yes, as I could have guessed. So I played Call of Duty, and one of the things, this is well documented. Same thing with Instagram and what you just mentioned, the algorithm. The reason that video games are so addictive, and the rewards that they ingrain,
Hmm.
the first level is the easiest level. So I need to do the least amount to get that next level, which is a reward in our brain. It taps
Mm-hmm.
into our reward systems. So that happens. Then the second level is a little bit harder, but I still get it. Then once you get to like level 50, 60, 70, you have to use so much more time, so much more energy, acquire so many more things, and achieve so many more things within the video game. Then you get the reward. And so what that does is you get addicted to that feeling, but over
Mm-hmm.
the time horizon or over the course of the game, the time horizon for you to get that feeling expands and expands. And so then that's how you get people to get addicted to it. And in video games specifically, there's like prestiges and stuff. So it's like once you get to a certain level, it resets. So then it even resets your addiction even more. So then you go back to level one. And then,
Oh,
so it's just this diabolical cycle. And I think that what you just mentioned in terms of the novelty that the TikTok and perhaps Instagram algorithm taps into is exactly that. It's like, oh, new account, I get thousands of views. Perfect. This is my go-to app. And
mm-hmm.
then it's like, wait a second, I didn't get very many views on this one, so I guess I need to use it a little bit more, post a little bit more, et
Yes,
cetera, et cetera. So it's
absolutely.
interesting.
Yeah, I didn't know that about Call of Duty. But you are obviously not the only person who's played it or mentioned it. I think it's very popular amongst males just across the board. So I think video games in their own right are very addicting and have maybe there's an agenda behind the usage of it. I think social media is a lot worse, but what would you say? Do you think that video games were made with a harmless intent?
Yes, I subscribe the vast majority of the time to Hanlon's razor. Have you ever heard of this?
No.
It's something along the lines of we assume malevolence when in reality it's ignorance or stupidity.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that the first person to create a video game was like, "Oh, I'm gonna ruin these kids' lives. I'm gonna delude these children until
Yes.
they have no idea what real life is." I don't think that was the intention. That being said, I think enough people know at this point we have enough level of awareness where people do know the realities of what that does to specifically, like you mentioned, young men. Same can be said for porn. It
Yeah.
it is known the negative effects. The positive effects, in my opinion, are negligible, if not zero. Like legitimately, I believe there to be zero positive benefits to either of those. But the negative effects are known, and the greed machine has reached the point of critical mass where it can no longer turn on itself and change. So I think that there was not an intent at the beginning, just like many
Mm-hmm.
things, but it's gotten to the point where so many people are profiting from it that people turn a blind eye willingly or they'll manipulate data and stuff like that. Same can be said for social media, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I'd have to agree.
We kind of already just dived into it, but the way I like to start every podcast, really, and especially with people that I have not met in person, I just ask, what's your story? Like, who is Peyton Elroy? How did you get from where you were being however far you want to go back to where you are now?
Mm-hmm. Hmm. It's so simple, but it's so loaded all the time.
Yeah, it's that's I get mixed. People will be like, "That's a loaded question." Some people will just answer immediately. So yeah, whichever way you want to take that, go ahead.
I've shared a bit on Twitter, but my upbringing was very standard. I grew up in Southern California, extremely blessed, beautiful area, beautiful weather, and abundance of health. You know, California is a mecca for farmland, beautiful climate that allows for a variety of different things to be grown. So I've always had access to healthy food, a healthy way of living. I played sports growing up, but in my household, I kind of just ate anything and everything that I wanted to. My mom actually works for Kellogg's, the snack company, Fruit Loops, Pop Tarts, things of that nature, and we got free samples all the time, and I just grew up eating fast food and the food she would bring home from work, and I was seemingly a healthy child. I was always thin and active and beautiful. And it wasn't until I went to college in San Francisco, so I left Southern California, went to San Francisco, that I really, really understood health, or started to understand it. And so when I was growing up, if you were to ask me, oh, do you feel unhealthy? Or when other people look at me, the answer would be no. Like, I never seemed unhealthy, but in hindsight, I was absolutely unhealthy. And I find this to be probably my biggest blessing. I think I was reflecting on this last night or sometime recently, that not only do all of our blessings generally come from pain or some kind of thing that seems like a misfortune at the time of it happening, let me back up. Everything that we experience has an opportunity to become a blessing. So growing up and eating the ways that I did, and then reflecting on it later and feeling like a lot of resentment and feeling, oh my gosh, like, why didn't my parents, like, teach me about health, and why did they just let me eat whatever I wanted to? Well, one, they probably didn't know much better, because they would have done better. And I'm not saying that like I just ate absolutely poorly, because my dad's a fantastic cook and I ate healthy food, but I was just as often eating unhealthy food. And at the point of realizing that I did eat very poorly growing up, when I was about 18, 19, like I just mentioned, I had a lot of resentment about my childhood. And then I later realized, oh, I actually absolutely needed to have that type of childhood and upbringing, because it forced me to have this polarizing view that I have now, and to become so obsessed with health and become so determined to change the outcome for my future kids and for the people who want to learn from me from around the world. And it was really amazing. So I don't want to say obviously, but for the people listening, health and nutrition are my passions and it's my profession. And so I came to knowing about all of these things from realizing that I had a very opposite childhood, and wanting to unpack that and kind of heal from that.
Very interesting. I think there's a lot of wisdom in what you just shared. I also think there's a lot of people can relate in many ways. One thing I heard you speak about with our mutual friend Ryan Ayala on his podcast, The Alchemist Library, was the idea that life happens for us, not to us. And I found that to be that struck me, because that is one of my favorite quotes of all time. Tony Robbins, I think, is the one who coined it. He said, "Life happens for us, not to us, and it's up to us to find the benefit." So I think you're exactly right. Over a long enough time horizon, anything that we deem negative, bad, less than, should have been, blah, 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 if we change our perspective, not if we change our perspective, but if we gain a more wise and broader perspective over a long enough time horizon, those things become positive. So it kind of makes that transition from the 2 to the 4. So it's interesting to hear you talk about the fact that, like, your mom, for example, working at Kellogg's, that's like the epitome of the processed food
Yes.
sort of anti-health, like, not agenda, but just like that mode of thinking. So it's interesting to know that, because I didn't know that. That's perhaps very insightful into why you are the way you are now and what you talk about now. So that's interesting.
Oh, yeah. I very often tell people, even to this day, and me being in this field for 7-8 years now, even to this day, if you were to look at my mom, talk to her, be a fly on the wall in the day of her life, you would be astonished at how I'm her daughter, or because we are just polar opposite when it comes to these things. She's definitely been open to some of my, let's say, recommendations over the last couple of years, but even then she's I'm laughing because it's people are seriously addicted to unhealthy food, and it's not just a saying, it's an actual problem, like a genuine problem. I'd put it up there with like homelessness, drug abuse. Like I would put food addiction as just as severe, if not one of the most severe things that society is plagued by.
Absolutely. I think I think it was the first form, more or less. Maybe not drugs. Now that I say that, but like we talked about video games, social media, any number of things that are quote addictive nowadays. Shopping, like retail therapy, which is another real addiction. Food was like the first
Yeah.
thing. Big food was one of the first industries to weaponize our neurology, our physiology, our reward systems in our brain. And once
Yeah.
again, I don't know if that was. I don't believe like so. The example I use, I wrote a thread on this recently about seed oils and how it actually started getting into our food system. Procter and Gamble was a soap making business
Mm-hmm.
and a soap and candle, and they realized that they could use cottonseed oil, which was a legitimate waste product. It was thrown away or it was used to make like cattle feed and all these things. They said, "Holy cow, we can use this." No pun intended.
I was just gonna say that's funny.
We can use this waste product to put into our soaps. And then they realized that the margins were so high on the soaps that they're like, we gotta find a way to put this into more people's hands and create more demand. So they literally just made it through a chemical process. They made it into a what we call Cisco, and it was like the first
Mm.
thing that really they started marketing it. Hey, it's digestible. Hey, it's digestible. And when you think back, it's like, what does that even mean? Like, like it's digestible. Yeah, I would hope so. I'm putting it in my body. Um, so my point
True.
is big food to harken back to your point. I believe is probably the most ingrained or one of at least in our society in terms of addiction because of the massive amount of resources and the time that it's been allowed to ruminate in our society. So I totally agree. I've experienced that before, whether it be cereal or I remember I gave up cereal for Lent one time. I don't even know who celebrates Lent, like Catholics, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm not even Catholic. And I just said one time in high school, I was like, I'm going to give up cereal. And it was legitimately very difficult. So,
Mm-hmm.
point being, I agree with you. I think that it's interesting that it's not surprising now that I think about it, that you came from a household where that was kind of like Kellogg, like she worked for Kellogg's, but you kind of used that insight and that perspective to formulate the path that you're on now, which is the complete opposite.
Yes. Well, there's a couple of things I want to touch on in what you just shared. So, back in, I want to say 2016, I came across this book at Barnes and Noble called Salt, Sugar, Fat, and I don't remember who wrote it. But that was one of the first books that gave me real insight on the fact that companies did actually weaponize food against us. And before we had talked about there being an innocence that people have when they're creating certain things for the world, like you said, Call of Duty. Oh, no, they did not have the intent to make children addicted to video games and have unrealistic expectations. But with food, yeah, I don't think that maybe the first box of cereal was meant to be a weapon against society, but back in, I want to say the 1920s, if I'm remembering correctly, is when they really started experimenting with salt, sugar, and fat on a scientific level to make it addicting. So, to make products addictive based off of how much salt, sugar, or fat they had. And this was run by the people who were in charge of these larger corporations. I think Quaker was mentioned. I'm thinking Nestle right now, but I don't know if Nestle came later. But when you think of the big conglomerate companies and the ones that existed back in around the early 1900s, they were absolutely trying to weaponize food against people because it was bringing in money. So I will say that food is an industry that food has always existed, but when we started making products and not just picking fruits and vegetables from the farm and having our meat from the animals, when products came about, there was absolutely an intent to make people addicted to them and to put money into people's pockets. And then to comment on my mom, her and I are very opposite with a lot of things, and I did, like I mentioned before, find a lot of resentment building within myself when I started to become aware of these things, and to really, when I was just feeling bad about myself, I was being a victim. When I started to gain awareness about who I really was, especially when I moved away and I was an adult and I graduated high school, I'm out of the house, I'm living by myself in a city that I've know nothing about, I was able to really see myself for Peyton and not for Peyton as a daughter or Peyton as a sister or Peyton as a person in her hometown with all of her friends and people who, quote, know her. I had to really see who am I for myself, and without the influence of people that have a certain idea about who I am. And so naturally, I think all of us between like 18 and 21, we start to gain awareness about who we really are. And through analyzing, okay, well, I'm this way because of what? Well, people generally think their upbringing. Yeah, I look the way that I do because of my genetics. I have these personality traits because of my parents. I have these morals and values because of my parents. And then I start to think, oh, well, I'm flawed. I look flawed in certain ways. I act flawed. And where does this come from? Oh, well, my parents raised me, so it must come from them. And then I would just get so upset because I felt like I wasn't where I wanted to be, or I wasn't who I wanted to be, and it was easy to pin it on my parents, which I do think we are born into the families that we are for perfect reason, because we evolve based off of what they are or what they are not. So in my case, I believe a lot of my evolution has come from wanting to be what my parents were not. And I don't even see that as a bad thing. I think depending on the way that you look at it, it can be seen as kind of bad or like negative, but I see everything as perfect. So in my particular case, I was meant to have the experiences I had so I could be the opposite and influence people in the opposite way. Whereas some people, they'll have a different upbringing and they will love it so much and they'll thrive through it that they'll be like, oh my gosh, well, this is exactly why I had this upbringing, because now I can take this and continue to implement it. Whereas some people will implement the opposite. So, yeah, that is why I find myself to be a very severe person, especially when it comes to health, because I know what it's like to be on the opposing end and to not have health. And I will never, ever allow myself to fall back into that lifestyle, or for my family to, and my children to have that upbringing. So I'm really fueled by my experiences, and I'm sure you are too.
Absolutely. And there's a lot to unpack there. But firstly, I want to ask you a question. You've mentioned the word health many times. And I think that me and Case Bradford spoke about this, how words can get hijacked and
Yeah.
how the words that we use are incredibly important. But like the actual, I'm talking about like the actual words that we speak into the world, what they mean, why we choose them, what they actually are in our perception and in the societal perception as well. So the word health, in my opinion, is one of those. And I asked a buddy of mine previously on the podcast what health meant to him. So I want to pose that same question. What does that word health mean to you?
beautiful question. And shout out to Case.
Great. One of the all-time human beings, I think.
Yeah, he is exceptional. Health to me is the true definition of wholeness and oneness as a human being. And so even that is very vague, right? What does that mean? So I've been reading a book this year called A Course in Miracles. Have you heard of it?
I have not.
Okay. I'm about to put everybody on listening to this. So A Course in Miracles has a couple different versions, but the particular one that I've been reading, and it's right in front of me right now, it's A Course in Miracles by Foundation for Inner Peace, and this one I think is the 3rd edition. But anyway, when people ask me, oh, what is it about? It is in relation to the Bible, I would say, but it doesn't share Bible verses. And it talks about God and the Holy Spirit, so I definitely see it as being more of a Christian type book, but I wouldn't even pin it as that either. But anyway, the reason I'm bringing this up is because I have been reading this almost every day. It's super thick. So the book has, like, how many pages? Probably about 500 pages, and the writing is really dense. And it reminds me of how when you're trying to read the Bible, and I will not assume that everyone listening has tried to, but if you try to read the Bible, you're not just going to zoom through it, because the particular language that is used, if you're reading one of the more original versions, is very Old English, maybe. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I don't know exactly, but it will be like, thou shall this, or just the text will be very dense with a thought or a way to understand something. And so the Course in Miracles is very much like that. I only read 2 or 3 pages a day because it's that dense and thick. But anyway, back to my point, it talks about how God is the one true thing that exists, and it doesn't talk about God as being a person. I feel like God is talked about more of an energy, and they do say he is the true example of oneness and wholeness. And the book talks about how humans are the children of God, and so we are never separate from him, and therefore we are also the epitome of oneness. And therefore, with health, we come to earth, we're born onto earth in a state of perfect health, which is perfect wholeness and oneness. So the way that they talk about health in here doesn't even necessarily mean oh, you ground every day and you use red light and you're a biohacker. It's the fact that you exist or have the opportunity to exist puts you in a perfect state of health. And beyond that, whatever one's interpretation of health would be is what they would deem themselves to have. So the way that I look at health is definitely that, okay, you're able to wake up every day with energy to seek out the life that you wish to have. You are clear of mind and heart as much as possible to make decisions that align with where you're trying to go in life. And you have enough strength to do anything you want in the physical form. And I'm sure I could name 20 other things that I relate to health, but those would be the main epitome of that. Health is the most true example of oneness and wholeness.
That's a great answer. I think that's profound. And even the last thing that you mentioned, is what my buddy Trevor said to him, answered that question. He said, it is the ability to basically to go about doing what it is you want to do without reluctancy, or he used it in the physical sense. So like physical health being, and I'm going to tie this into overall because I think it relates. Physical health is being able to do what you want to do physically without fear of getting injured or actually getting injured. And I think that that could be said about mental health, spiritual health as well. So being able to embark on journeys or physical or mental or spiritual endeavors and not be injured by them, not be overcome by them. And I don't know if that makes any sense if I'm articulating that well, but that's how I kind of draw that conclusion. I think that's a profound answer. It's the most true form of wholeness and oneness. That's you said earlier that you referred to yourself as severe in regards to health. What did you mean by that? Because you I don't know if you know this, you don't come across as a very severe person.
I think it's just because we haven't met yet, Nolan.
Oh, maybe I'm wrong.
Well, even using that word, it's like you probably have a different interpretation of severe than what I do. And I'm like flipping through my folded pages in A Course in Miracles because I would love to just, man, I read something within the last couple of weeks during my fast, which we'll get into, that talked about health. And I want to find it, but I'll come back to it. Want to read what exactly they wrote because that was just amazing. But yes, severe. I love that word. I love the fact that I am a severe person. And my definition of severe is somebody that, oh wow, I actually haven't even thought of the breakdown of this, but it's been a word that has come to mind for me this year in particular because I am, in one regard, extremely opinionated, extremely strongly willed, and disciplined. And I think that makes me severe. Like if we were to take, let's just say health, because I'm extremely severe in health, and if you look at the way that I operate in health and you look at the way that I think about it, without me having to describe that I am severe in health, one would come to that conclusion on their own. And even just looking at the fact that I just did a 14-day fast is severe in itself. And so I think the way that people look at the word severe as in like maybe dangerous or over the top or too much. And in many ways, I'm all three. But I do it in a very controlled manner. I think that's where people would be kind of confused by me using that word because I'm, as much as I am over the top and maybe even sporadic, I'm very calculated about being in those ways. And if I've done something, I've thought it through not once, not twice, not a million times, but a trillion times. I've really considered all of the possibilities and what I'm going to do. And a lot of what I do in relation to health and being severe doesn't make sense to other people. And I think that's why there's a lot of like confusion about, like I shared a video on my Instagram story early this morning because it was actually a little bit past midnight. I was up. I was wide awake. I had been running and walking around the city where I live for almost 2 hours, and I was just having a moment where I'm sure you can relate when you're working out and you just have a great insight and you want to share it because that blood and that oxygen are pumping through you. I was talking about how people tend to misunderstand me because I'm a female and because I'm a woman. And that has become an opposition to being severe because a lot of people are trying to, or namely women, they're trying to get away from their masculine edge that they've created, being in a very tough Western society where we are kind of forced to be independent as soon as we become an adult. Even in childhood, a lot of young women are operating from a level of independence. They're taking care of their family when they're supposed to be a child. They have a lot of responsibility, and then that translates over into the adult world where, like you go to college and you get a job and you work your way up the corporate ladder. And so now I would say over the last 2 years, I think society has become more awakened to the fact that women are generally more unhappy living in this way. And so they don't want to embody their masculine edge or qualities anymore because it's been too much for them. It's given them the opposite goal or result that they wanted out of life, which is to be relaxed and to have balanced hormones and to, in many cases, be a part of a family and have kids. And so, in saying this, people are questioning me because I do have a platform and I do have an audience, and they see me as, okay, I'm definitely very feminine. I look feminine, I act feminine, I teach women about how to embrace more of their femininity, but also I'm extremely severe in the way that I go about health with some of my routine or the things that I partake in or the actions that I display. And it's very confusing because it's seemingly against the feminine essence to be severe and masculine, and I don't think they are separate. I think it comes back to the wholeness and oneness where in health you're never just because I'm a female, for example, I'm not just going to be dainty and picking berries in the field and getting sunshine on my face while I lay in the grass all day. Like, that's definitely a beautiful part of embracing feminine health, but all of us are masculine and feminine in our core, and I think it's up to us to balance the two. And so I see myself as being able to get away with being severe in kind of a masculine way because I can also be very severe in a feminine way too. I can definitely dance on both sides very well with equal amounts of energy, but I will say that I tend to favor the masculine side a little bit more, and I think that's just who I am in my soul, to be honest.
That's once again a lot to unpack, and I feel
Yes.
I looked this up while you were speaking. Severe, very great, intense, strict or harsh, and
Yeah.
allow me to sort of air out my thoughts on that, if you will.
Yeah, please.
Because now that you mentioned, I'm like, okay, I can see what you mean by you being perceived as severe or harsh or strict or great, intense. And the best example is a 14-day fast, as you mentioned. What I believe is the masculine severity is more physical, and I'll explain this. The feminine severity is more spiritual. So, for example, I'm drawn to the images I have from reading books about American Indians and the tribes. The men would go off to war and fight in a physically severe environment, like physically harsh, physically
Yeah.
very great, very intense to the death. And when the men that survived the battles would come back, there's many stories of women committing suicide or cutting themselves, which is very severe. What I don't know if this is being articulated digestibly, but that to me is a more spiritual severity. The actual act of fighting a war is more physically severe. So I
Yes.
think it's an interesting dichotomy. Perhaps you are severe, yeah, and I would argue that, especially after learning a little bit more about you, I would consider a 14-day fast or anyone who partakes in such activities to be a past the sinner in terms of their severity in that regard. Whereas you're not going to go fight a war, right? Like you're not going to go punch somebody in the face and do an MMA fight, right? So you don't have the physical severity or the masculine severity in that sense. But you mentioned a word dangerous, and this I'm having one of those TikTok moments where I feel like you just presented a word that I was thinking about, because I literally, I'm not kidding. I said, maybe I'm thinking of severe as more dangerous, and then you said that word. That's exactly right. I had this even after I didn't know the definition of severe until just now. I had it as more of like a dangerous sort of like on the ledge, like panting, sweating, sort of fierce type of definition, which masculine, coming from my perspective.
Right.
Now that I tie that back into the physically severe as opposed to spiritually severe, I would align that definition I had previously to the physically severe. So it's interesting. I don't know if that makes any sense. It might be a
It
little bit
does
of
make
gibberish.
sense. The word severe, I think, is actually kind of broad, because it was something, like I mentioned, it has come to mind for me this year, and I've thought about myself being severe through different situations. So it definitely has a connotation of like a masculine, kind of scary, dangerous, as we just said, energy to it. But I think severe can mean like just great. Like, this is
Yeah.
severely delicious. Like,
Yeah. Wow.
but
Yeah.
also, I like to use words in my own special way. So I don't think there's really words on how, or there's no rules on how to use words, but I think that being severe as a woman is really important, because we have our own special role in life, especially when we think about having a family or having children. I actually have a couple of tweets in my drafts on Twitter, by the way. I don't call it X. I will never call it X.
No, I can't do that. No, that's.
Twitter.
I've never once called it that. I don't think I ever will.
Yes, thank you. Amen. So sometimes, and this is like, I don't share how I write my content or anything, but I'll share a little bit now. I will have tweets in the drafts, and it's often a couple renditions of a thought that I'm having, and I'll have to find the best way to articulate it, because as we spoke about before, Twitter is very special because people have to care about your thoughts, and they have to be captivated by the way you place one word next to the other. And so I have a couple tweets in my drafts about how that I'm trying to articulate the best way to say it in a short amount of characters too. How women think that they want to have a soft life, and men think at this point in time, because of the red pill, that they want to have a very just laid back, chill, relaxed, dainty woman. And of course, as I mentioned before, women should be that, and also masculine. And I think where people are getting kind of psyoped within themselves is that they are wanting women to lean so much the opposite way of masculinity, because they've been masculine for quite some time in society, that they are forgetting that the masculinity is very important. Like raising children, I personally don't have any of my own yet, but it's not just going to be something where the kids are going to be easy and listening to you all the time, and they're just going to sit down if you tell them to sit down, or
Not your
you know,
kids. Yeah, mine will.
I think raising children requires a lot of masculinity in terms of leadership, in terms of discipline that you need to enact. And as a woman, you can do it in a feminine way, but it still has to be coming from a masculine place if you're asserting boundaries and setting an order. That is masculine in its own right. And women have to be physically strong, carry babies. If they're going to have a job or if they're going to be at home, they're going to be needing to use their body in some way. And I think that a woman needs to have so much emotional strength. Like, that's a way in which she can be severe, but in a feminine way. So when we think about emotions, it's feminine, but the strength in which you understand them and embody those emotions can be masculine, depending on just how much the load is. So I think that, like, this is a very intricate topic that we could go really deep on, but I think that women should not be afraid of having a strong spirit, because at the end of the day, we are a soul. We're not a male or a female. In the grand scheme of things, yes, in this lifetime, okay, I have a female body. This is a certain role that I've, in my opinion, decided to play. And so I'm going to lean into that. But I'm never going to forget the masculine or the spirit within me that if, hey, she wants to, as we keep going back to, do a 14-day fast, and in her female body that might be seen as very severe because of her hormones and fertility and bearing children and all of this. Well, there's also a reason why I'm being called to do this. And so I think if it really wasn't meant for me to partake in, then the call wouldn't be so strong. So there's listening to the role that you've assigned yourself in the lifetime, in the body that you're in, but also listening to the soul and to the spirit and honoring those things, I'll just say things, that need to be nurtured through that.
Once again, a lot to unpack. I'm reminded of a quote, or I'll paraphrase, from Andrew Tate, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts. It was something along the lines of, I will protect the outside world so that she can protect my inside. And so inside, in my opinion, being spiritual. What are your thoughts on that? In terms of like the masculine, feminine interplay, I guess.
Yes, that is very important and can be done best when a woman has explored both worlds for herself, but namely the spiritual world, which is very heavy in its own right.
I agree. Go ahead.
She's unable to help anyone in that realm if she has not helped herself.
I agree completely with that as well. That's a whole nother topic, and something I've actually had several conversations about in the last 2 weeks, about how, or whether or not, not about whether or not, but I've had conversations about selfishness and is there like true altruism and things like that. I think what you're saying is you must first understand the I, as Zach Shankin says. You must understand the I to be able to give. Like, so for me to say I love you, I must understand who is I. Like, what does it mean that I love you? So that's what I'm reminded of.
Interesting.
Based on your last comment.
What do you think about his quote, Tate's quote?
I think it resonates because I'm also reminded of Jordan Peterson's whole ideology on or philosophy on order and chaos. I don't know if you've read any of his writings on it. He basically believes so the Taoist symbol of the yin and yang, the dark is order, the white is chaos. According to the writings of that time and interpretation of them thereafter, the dark is order, white chaos, dark is masculine, white is feminine. And they're perfectly balanced with, as you mentioned, the feminine, and I believe the same should be said, or is said for the masculine. They exist within each other because in the yin and yang symbol there is a a circle of white in the black and then a circle of black in the white. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not one or the other. It is both in perfect harmony. And he talks about how we desire or a good life is lived on the line in between. It's when you get too far on the side of order, you become tyrannical. When you get too far on the side of chaos, you become a nihilist. And
Mm-hmm.
so, all that to be said, I believe that I do believe that the feminine is more chaotic. That's what's represented by the chaos and the spirituality of things. The masculine is order and the physical things. And this is why I believe that we talked about saying he in referring to God. I believe that God is the order, and that's why we've personified him as a masculine personification,
Mm.
because
Interesting.
that is the order. And then think about, this is something I've never actually thought about until just now. What do we call nature? Mother Nature,
Mother
which is a
Nature.
feminine personification.
Mm-hmm.
So that'd be an interesting thing to explore. I've never really thought about the connection between Mother Nature and Father God. Perhaps
Mm.
that's something to dive into.
Yeah. Wow, thanks for sharing that. I
Yeah,
want to ask you.
go ahead.
No, go ahead first.
I was going to change the subject, but you go ahead.
I want to ask you if you believe that we choose the life that we come into or if it's just bestowed upon us.
Hmm. Do you mean from conception? Like, do we choose, like, from the time of conception, or the life, like, in this exact instant for me, myself, and you?
Well, let's back up. Do you believe we live multiple lives?
In terms of, like, reincarnation?
Yeah.
I haven't thought much about it, but I would say I do not believe that we are conscious of, if we do, I don't believe we're conscious of them. I do believe that we do live a life outside of this, at least after. So
Mm-hmm.
um, that would be a multiple life. But yeah, I believe that if we do have a life after our body has perished, in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion. And that is, from a biblical standpoint, like, one is either in heaven, one is in hell, one is in peril, and one is in great serenity and joy. So I don't know. Do you?
I definitely do. And I think more of what I've shared in terms of like the feminine and then the spirit as being kind of like two separate things. It's never separate, but there is a way to look at them separately. I think my stance on that makes more sense if you believe, and it doesn't even have to be you, but if one believes in having multiple lives. Because if I didn't believe we have multiple lives, and I think my stance would be different, but inside of me, because I believe that we've lived multiple, like hundreds of lives, different bodies, different timelines, the spirit transcends all of those lifetimes, whether it's on earth or not. And that's even a whole other topic itself. Is there just earth? Is space real? I see people talking about this on Twitter all the time. And I don't even know what my full stance is at this point, because I've genuinely, I feel like I've considered everything. And because I feel that I've considered everything, I also feel like I don't know that much. Like, would this be the right term? Paralysis by analysis?
I relate
Is
to
that,
that. You overanalyze something to the point that you can no longer act on the analysis.
yeah, pretty much. It's like knowing so much about so many different things that you actually like don't know anything almost.
I believe it was Socrates. Let me look this up. Socrates said something along the lines of wisdom. Let me see real quick. Basically,
But
I agree with you. I know that I know nothing is a quote from Socrates, and I think that relates to what you're saying, because it kind of goes to. Have you heard of Naval Ravikant?
no, I don't believe I have.
He's he's who I refer to him as a billionaire monk, and I've mentioned him on the podcast several times. So sorry if this is like your 8th time hearing this, but he has a quote, or actually he relays a quote. I don't believe it's his, so I won't attribute it to him. But I am nothing, I am everything, and that kind of even stems to or relates to the dichotomy we were just talking about in the yin and yang, and the masculine and the feminine. I
Yeah.
am both, but I am neither. I am one, but I am nothing. I am
Right.
Ryan Ayala's favorite quote is, "We are not a drop in the ocean, but the ocean in a drop." So
Mm-hmm.
it's how do you balance that? And I want to ask you a question. So do you think you said you do believe definitively that we live multiple lives?
Absolutely.
We is the plural, or yeah, the plural of I. So basically, by saying that, you're saying that I, this from your perspective, I've lived multiple lives. What
Mm-hmm.
is I? What does that mean? I.
The soul.
So you think the
So,
soul, the spirit, is what you said. So explain that, if you will.
yeah, I think soul and spirit can be interchangeable. The way that I see spirit is a little bit more of a human. How do I say this? The soul is by itself always, and it resides in the body at the time that we're alive. Spirit, I feel, is also an energy. It's not necessarily the human body, but the human body works close with the spirit. It's like the human body is a conductor for the spirit, but the soul is like kind of always by itself. Like the soul has its own intelligence. And that, oh my gosh, I've never tried to explain that out loud. So that was my first go at it.
There you go.
But when I say it depends on the context of the sentence or the conversation. But if I say, I'm going to get my hair done today, well, Peyton, in this lifetime, right now, in a human body, is going to get her hair done. But when I say, I believe that my soul or our souls or we have, that's the soul speaking, I think, from its own intelligence, because this is just what I've gathered over time through personal experiences, through research, so through different sources of information, that I feel like the soul has its own knowing about things. And yeah, I think that all of us have lived many, many lives in many different forms, and it doesn't have to be as a human or on Earth.
Very interesting, because that gets my brain stirring about like intuition. On the most base level, I do believe that we are all God. I believe in God.
Yeah,
By God, I mean like this is what I mean by the I am nothing, I am everything quote. Everything that is existence exists in me, yet I am a negligible part of it, if that makes sense. Because from an atomic level, we are literally made up, you and I, this countertop, everything is made up of the exact same source at the most first principle level. So
yeah.
perhaps, yeah, that's interesting. I'm gonna have to go on a long walk and think about how that relates.
I like how
You know what
you said you're a god.
yeah, well, so yeah, well, that sounds pretty arrogant when you say it like that. No, I'm
Well,
kidding. No, I know what you're saying.
yes.
No, because I put out a tweet like early on my Twitter about this, that if we are made in God's image and God is the creator, a creator in of himself, I was using it as like creating things rather than consuming them.
Mm-hmm.
But if we are made in the image of God, then we are at least a part of God. And if God is a creator, then we are creators as well. That means we are meant to create. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that? The idea that we are God.
Based off of your explanation, I would be in pretty much full agreement. And this is where I think a lot of Christians or people who claim to be as part of a religion, they get upset when you say this, when you say, I am God, because they think that you are taking the place of the God that they see in their head, and they think that you are just placing yourself at a very high level of importance, which one is true. All in all, like, all of us are as important. But I think in the way that, from my perception of their perception, is there's a disconnect. So anyway, I do believe that we are all God. And I don't see God in the way that, I think we talked about this either before or at the beginning of the podcast, but I don't see God in the same way that a lot of Christians do, or other religions. I don't see it as a person. I just see it as an energy or an all-encompassing, I'm going to put air quotes, thing. And I'm even coming to develop my own understanding of what I think that is. It's really only been this year that I've really delved into opening my mind up to believing that there is something called God and that it is the force, because before I was kind of just, there is something beyond us. I don't know what it is. I don't know what to call it. So I would say universe a lot more. But now I'm more open to using God because I think it's a more specific energy. But anyway, if we are all his, just using the common verbiage with he and his children, as you alluded to, or his creation, then we are never separate from him or from it. We are all the same, just different parts. And I think we all come to earth to have our own unique experiences. So we have a soul within us, but we're in a physical human body. It's two separate things. We all come with God consciousness. Even if you don't believe in God, well, the consciousness still exists within you. That's why you're here on the same plane as everyone else with a certain level of awareness. We're all here, and our experiences are allowing us to gather more awareness, more information, and therefore more, quote, God consciousness. So all of us are here doing exactly what we're meant to be doing at every given point in time, which is why I believe life is perfect all the time. And therefore, with those experiences, we're creating more consciousness for more of everything to just become more intelligent. And then we carry our souls into the next life with even more awareness and more wisdom in a different life, a different body, different circumstances, and we just keep going. Now, I don't know what the end point is or what the goal is, but that's the way that I see everything. So we are absolutely God, in my opinion. We're absolutely of equal importance because him and I, or he and I, you and I, none of us are separate from anything. Like, none of us are separate from each other in the grand scheme of things. So we're all equally as important, and that's why we can say that we're all God.
The comment you made about the Christian, well, like I mentioned, it's we have personified God for a few reasons, in my opinion. I believe that we personified God as a masculine personification because that's written in our souls or in the existence of the world, that's God is the order of the world. And like I mentioned, I believe that the masculine is represented, or the order is represented by the masculine. I think that actually causes a lot of disconnects for people because I don't think saying that God is not a human being. I don't think any Christian would disagree with that as well. But saying that we have placed this personification on him, and it's funny, I'm literally using the personification and describing it, but I don't think that puts the Bible at odds. I don't think it makes it any less true because we have done that for a reason. Like I believe the reason I believe that is because God is a source of energy, of power, of creation a thing that we cannot comprehend. We have no justification. We have no, it's not humanly possible, in my opinion. So what we do is, like in terms of like the actual power of God. So what I believe we have done and do is we personified God so that we can relate to him, because otherwise we would not be able to. So that's why I believe that it doesn't put it at odds. It actually, in fact, increases, in my opinion, the efficacy of, quote, having a relationship with God, because having it's like saying having a relationship with air. Like you can't, right? It's not. We can't conceive
Oh,
it, right?
yes.
But
Okay.
we
Yeah.
personify God so that we can know God and then we can become more
Mm.
like Him. And there's another point that I want to touch on. I can't remember who said this either, but something along the lines of, at least biblically, we fell out of connection with God in the Garden of Eden. So we were born as humans into perfect union with God. There was no separation. We were one in the same. What I believe to be the case now is the human experience is regaining that connection, or as much of it as we can, through consciousness. So we were unconsciously connected, because this is what happens in Eden when Eve eats the apple and Adam eats the apple. Then we understand good and evil. So we gain consciousness. We were unconsciously connected to God. We lost that connection, and now the human experience is to gain that connection through consciousness, which is probably a few podcasts in and of itself. But what are your thoughts on that?
I really like how you explained the personification, because I never thought of it that way or heard someone else explain it that way. So that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I The last part I don't fully resonate with, because I don't see anything as separate. So I don't see Earth as like a separate experience from God. I don't think that we're trying to, like, I just really think that we're here to have as many experiences as possible, to learn and gather knowledge. That's what I think everything is. And I think that the test of your knowledge is what you do with the knowledge that you have. So it's kind of like karma in a sense. Like, okay, if you have done certain things, you're going to gather goodness or lack of goodness from that experience, and it's just kind of like a domino effect, and whichever way that you go. All energy is a positive or negative charge, and every thought, everything, like physical or not, is a form of energy. And so it's can only ever be positive or negative. So that's kind of how I see karma as even being able to exist, is that the energy is going to go one way or the other. Sometimes it's mixed, but it's never neutral. But anyway, we're not, personally, I don't think we're here because we like fell short of anything or we're trying to get back to anything. I think we're perfect and whole all the time, and we're just gathering more information as time goes on. And that'll put you in a different place based off of the charge on the energy. But I don't think we're lacking anything, really. And I don't think that we're here because like God is missing or something. Like, I think, yeah, I'm gonna pause there.
Yeah, this is definitely a conversation that should not be had fast. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's an interesting perspective, because it's almost like it folds back in on itself. If we are all connected, yeah, I mean, I think your comment about everything being perfect, I think life does happen for us. So here's a question: would you consider yourself a perfect human being?
Yes.
So expound on that. If
People might take that out of context, but that's fine.
No, yeah, absolutely. Would you expound on that, please?
Yeah, well, it ties back into kind of what I just said, like everything's perfect all the time. And because I exist, that means that I am perfect. And I've explained this before in other places, but I love resharing the thought. So when I look at perfect, I understand that there's generally two different connotations. So there's the first perfect, which is the one that everyone thinks of, is like, oh, you're the perfect person, you're the most beautiful, you're the smartest, you have perfect morals, like you are just perfect, like the model, the ideal. That's what a lot of people think of when they hear the word perfect. And there is that one interpretation. Now, the other one, and the one that I most favor and live in, is perfection just is. The fact that something exists means that it's perfect. It's not ideal. It's not what you imagine or want it to be. It just is. And that is perfect. So I fall into the second type of perfect. Now, other people might argue that she is perfect because she does all these things. Okay, thank you. But I see myself as perfect because I simply have the opportunity to exist.
That's very interesting. I'm not in disagreement with you. I just am not sure how my thought. You know what? If we do a second podcast, I want to retouch on this question.
Yeah,
Because
we will, and we will touch on it.
Because that's a very interesting point. I want to have adequate time to formulate my opinion on it, or my thoughts at least. So we've obviously talked about like femininity and masculinity as well. But one of the things, and we talked about health. One of the things that I believe personally directly impacts femininity in the Western world the most negatively, and as a result, masculinity as well. Where it originates, is up for debate. That's not really the point of this question that I want to pose. But what are your thoughts on birth control?
It's perfect.
That's every answer.
There is perfection in it for sure. Yeah. So man, I have a severely open-minded view on the world, I will say. But when it comes to birth control, I absolutely think that it was made with a positive intent to give women power. And everyone just don't click out of this podcast because you heard me say that. Keep listening. I absolutely believe the creators of birth control were trying to do right by women, and they wanted to help women take control of their bodies, their lives, give them more options, and really more opportunity. Now, everyone is going to have their own perception on how they think women should be. So I do think that these particular creators had their own perception that they obviously based their actions off of. And I do think at the time, a lot of people supported birth control, not because they supported the reproductive harm that it would eventually cause that they didn't even know about. They supported wanting to give women power and freedom. So I think there was an innocence in that. And we can honor that by acknowledging it, right? But at this point in time, we have found that birth control is actually the complete opposite. It is not empowering to women, and it still gives them opportunity, and that opportunity is to hopefully heal from the damage that it has caused. Because birth control is one of the most damaging things that not only women are victim to, but society as a whole. When women are taking birth control, their hormones are affecting everyone around them. The hormones mosquito is eating me.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect.
Their hormones are being excreted into the water supply when they use the bathroom. Oh my gosh, this is like a huge problem, birth control. And I believe it disempowers women, as I just mentioned, because they think that they're having the freedom to have sex with whoever they want without repercussion, and the repercussion being a child. But there's absolutely repercussion in the form of mood swings, not being the same person on a literal cellular level, emotional level, physical level, their body changes, like just everything about a woman and her essence changes from birth control, and not for the better. And so I have a very grim outlook on birth control at this point in time, but I will say that I acknowledge that it was initially meant to help women, and we've learned over time that it's not the case anymore. And I think people need to understand just how, and here comes my word. What's the word?
Perfect.
No, severe.
Oh no.
Severe
Oh
birth
no.
control is in relation to the negative effects on women and moreover society.
I believe this relates to Hanlon's razor. The more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm like, everything that what's the word? Like, don't support in the world, I can just apply Hanlon's razor and it makes sense because I want to say it exactly. Never attribute to malice that which is adequately explained by stupidity, which stupidity is ignorance. So just like not knowing. And I think you're exactly right. I believe just like processed food, just like video games, there wasn't, I don't believe that human beings were like, I'm going to ruin the world. I believe there are
Yeah.
evil people. There are truly malevolent individuals in this world, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That being said, I do believe that the vast majority of things that we perceive as malevolent are actually just evolved stupidity, or which turns into greed, and then greed turns into any number of things, in my opinion. So I agree with you. I think birth control it's so, I didn't realize this until I kind of joined. First it was esoteric Instagram, but then esoteric Twitter. I didn't even realize that it was like a thing. I never thought about it a single time. I was like, oh yeah, she's on birth control. Like, cool, good for her. Right? Like, I just didn't
Yeah.
think about it. But now, like, when you understand hormones and you understand how we actually live our lives and why we live our lives from a physiological standpoint, and the impact that birth control has on a physiological standpoint, it really is incredible. And I compare it to this. I took ADHD medicine. Actually, no, I took ADHD chemicals for,
Poison?
yeah, exactly, for 7 years.
Yeah.
And I attribute to a similar degree, or in a similar way, because the reason I stopped, I had several friends over a course of time tell me like, oh yeah, you're absolutely two different people. And I was like, I don't want to do that. Like, what do you mean? I don't want to be like completely different because I take this chemical concoction that this old white dude in the basement told me I need to take because I sat there and didn't listen to a sound properly for 7 hours. Like, I don't want to do
Yeah.
that. And so when I started diving into, I've only done surface level dives, but the studies that show even like levels of attraction to certain individuals based on birth control and not birth control. There's also a T-shirt study. Are you familiar with this?
A t-shirt study?
The sweaty T-shirt or the sweaty clothes study?
I don't believe so. Enlighten
I'm
me.
going, well, I'm going to certainly not be exact with this description, but so the gist is this. A group of, like a person performing a study took women and gave them a bag of clothes from different men, and the one bag of clothes had clothes that had no fragrances, no deodorant, no cologne, no nothing. It was sweat and dirt from men that had just worked out and all these things. The other bag had a man that was like wearing cologne and deodorant and household like hygiene products, and they asked them which one they thought would be more attractive. And I want to say that it was pretty split. But what they found is that every single, I believe this, I might be messing this up. I hope I'm not. This is the general gist, though. I think it was split relatively even, but every single one of the participants that was on birth control chose every single one. So it was split in terms of numbers, but like, so some people that weren't on birth control chose one or the other. But I
Mm-hmm.
believe every single person that that was on birth control chose the one with the fragrances and all those things. So even that alone, like, I don't think that that's a coincidence. I think that that's
No.
an insight into how powerful it is.
It it really is so surprising when you look at it on a deep level how, one, this could be normalized, and two, just how deep it actually goes, just as you mentioned.
It's pretty interesting. The so I was thinking about that, and I wanted to ask you. I'm glad I got your opinion, but it got me thinking about other things in the world. What do you think are the other traps or things that are common in today's Western society that are traps for women, more or less, or harmful, that are not really perceived so by the masses?
Ooh, I'm sure there are many.
I would think so as well.
and I'm and I'm blanking. Okay. Well, something that comes to mind is like Botox. And I recently came to a very surprising epiphany, even like within myself. Oh no, I can't say within myself because I've never had Botox. I've never had any kind of like physical alteration besides getting braces for my teeth. But I definitely think that Botox and cosmetic procedures have become more normalized because women are deeply insecure from the way that society has persuaded us that we need to be otherwise. And so my initial thought, but let's just say we're going back to 2 months ago, my thought on this would be, okay, well, I still think this. Botox and injections definitely have a negative impact on your health. And it's not just on a physical level, but emotional and spiritual level, because a lot of women are leaning on these avenues essentially in order to feel better about themselves. And so I don't think that changing your physical appearance always changes how you feel on the inside. And in fact, sometimes women will get work done and they'll feel even more insecure because not only will they feel they'll essentially feel fake. So it's like, okay, I don't feel good about myself. I'm going to change my appearance and hopefully I'll feel better about myself. And then they get the changes done and then they're like, okay, well, I didn't address the root cause of why I don't feel good about myself because it's an internal thing more than external, unless you look, really bad, I guess. And then on top of that, you feel like a fraud because then you know that you artificially altered your appearance. So sometimes they double the blunt of the insecurity. And so before I would say, okay, the normalization of Botox and changing your physical appearance so much is not very good for women. And then I had another thought, which I don't have, like, my clear stance on this is not apparent in my mind yet. I had noticed that a lot of the women that he hangs around definitely, or hung out around, had a lot of cosmetic work done. And I asked him what he thought about that because I'm always curious as to what different guys think about this. And he's obviously a very successful man. And so I was wondering if his mindset had attributed to his success with women on this, and he had said that, Peyton, not all women are naturally gifted with superb beauty. And so the ones that are not want to obviously change that. And someone like you might not understand this because you don't come from the same genetic disposition that they do. If I can kind of paraphrase what he said.
Yeah,
And so
I'm sure he said that exact wording.
that kind of opened my mind because I'm coming from a place of where I know that I'm a beautiful person, and I've never considered getting any kind of work done just because I don't think I need it. But does that come from being objectively beautiful, or does that come from an inner place where I am confident in myself no matter what my physical looks like? Now, there are definitely some things that I've been insecure about in terms of the way that I look growing up, and even to this day, there are some things that I think wouldn't be bad to change, but have I actually felt like it was really important for me in order to feel good about myself to do that? No. So the reason I bring this up is because I think that it's pretty tough if you are a woman and you truly do not think that you are beautiful, or there is something about the way that you look that you find to be really unsettling. Is it wrong for her to change that? Because if she does, let's just say she wants a nose job, for example. Okay, is she getting a nose job because her nose is really that bad? I mean, no one, it's all like of each person's personal opinion, so I guess there can't be a right answer on this, but I think the way that a woman feels internally is going to be the best marker for her confidence, because people who truly love themselves and accept themselves are going to be more beautiful in their own way. It's kind of like how there are girls who will be interested in guys who are not very good looking, but because of who he is as a person, it makes him more beautiful and therefore more attractive. And so I think considering a couple of different things is important in this topic of, okay, should women... On one hand, I think if you're not confident with yourself internally, if you can't accept yourself, you probably will never fully accept yourself, even if you get the work done. But then what if you do get the work done and then you just feel like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better, like I look more beautiful. And then she is, it's like, is that quality? And then also on top of that, changes her appearance, or let's just say upgrades her appearance, that puts her in better standing with being able to potentially mate with somebody, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's a lot
It's
to look at.
I haven't thought about it that way, frankly, in terms of if it's if it's a woman's job to be beautiful, if that is something that someone believes in, then is it wrong for them to do that? I would The way that I would go about diving into that argument or that topic would first be to delineate why beauty is important. And
Yeah.
from an evolutionary standpoint, it is important to understand why men seek beauty, and also why women do not seek it as much. A woman that is beautiful, like as you mentioned, is much more likely to find a more suitable mating companion, and therefore, so a more beautiful woman. You see this all the time. Let's use gold diggers as example. Yeah, no. So this I actually changed my perspective of quote gold diggers when I thought about
Yeah.
this. So the goal of a woman, in my opinion, from a reproductive standpoint, and I'm talking hardwired neurologically, whether they're aware of this or not,
Yeah.
is to protect young and themselves so that their young can become grown and then exist in the world in a safe way. A beautiful woman has a much higher chance of doing so because she will have access to a higher masculine or male mating pool. What that means is higher is more resources. More resources means higher likelihood of offspring and the mother to survive. So this is why you see gold diggers, quote, because to the feminine, looks are much less important than to the man. What's important to the feminine, this is why status, money, recognition, fame, and this explains why you often see pretty women with uglier men and not vice versa. Much more often will you see a prettier woman with an uglier man than you will see a good-looking man with a ugly woman. And that's why, because a woman takes into account resources more so than a man would, and a man takes into account looks more so than a woman would. And
Right.
here's why I think they take into account looks, a man. Because beauty, and I wrote this down, I believe everybody is beautiful. In their
Yes.
healthiest form, I believe every human being, and I mean like physically, I think that it's a lie that Botox or a boob job or whatever you have will make you more beautiful. What will make you more beautiful is, and this is going to sound so like surface level, is getting your gut microbiome in check, losing weight, having a proper body fat percentage, not using hair products that literally kill your hair, that kill your skin, all these things. I think true health, like the healthiest version of every human being, is a beautiful human being. I believe that because I don't believe that we are selective breeders. And in the past, also let me go back to why I think beauty is more important to men, because I believe physical beauty is, and I mean this in the non-Botox way. I don't want to say
Yeah.
work because it's not work. I want to say the non-exogenously altered way. Men value that because, as I just mentioned, I believe external beauty, physical beauty, to be a representation of internal health. And the reason that's important for a man is because, oh my gosh, look at this beautiful woman. I want to mate with her. Why do I want to do that? Because she seems healthy, which means what? My children would be healthy. So she wants physical resources so that her child will be safe. I want a healthy child. So what's the proxy that we've evolved to notice this with? Resources for feminine to masculine. To masculine to feminine, it's beauty, because and there's so many cases of this. It seems outrageous, but a woman that is perceived as fat and ugly loses weight and gets her health in check literally can become a completely different physical appearance. So that's my philosophy on it.
Yes, that's absolutely incredible. I'd thought closely to that, but not fully, and you explained it wonderfully. So can you hear me?
I couldn't hear you for the last little bit.
Okay. Is it good now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. The way that you explained that was excellent, because I definitely correlate with beauty being a marker of health, but I didn't see men as seeking out beautiful women because they want healthy children. I didn't fully make that connection. So applause on that. Wow.
I would like to say that I was the first person to think of it, but I'm sure that I'm not. I'm sure that I got that from somebody. But so, well, because I think it's important. Like, okay, why are men attracted to, quote, beautiful women? And then you ask yourself, what makes a woman, quote, beautiful? What makes a woman attractive? Well, it's the hourglass figure, which has to do with fertility. There's studies that link waist size and these things with fertility. Boobs, breasts are feeding sources for children. So obviously
Yeah.
that's going to be attractive to a man. So when you think about it from this, I think about it from like an evolutionary standpoint, where we don't do things by accident. It's not an accident that certain women or certain look profiles are perceived to be more beautiful by the vast majority of men, and I believe that to be why. And
Mm,
I want to answer, or not answer, but I want to go back to your question. Do I think women, it is their job? It's a woman's job to be beautiful. I want to flip the script and ask you a question.
yeah.
What would be the masculine equivalent that is a man's job to do or to be?
Ooh. Hmm. So in my mind, I immediately thought about what do I value in a man, but I need to think more broadly. Um, it is his job. I do think it is a job's man. A man's job to be ambitious. So that is something that I would have on my personal list, but I think as a whole, absolutely. Is it his number one job? I'm not sure. I'm actually going to have to think about this question. But right now, I will say ambitious because if he is working towards something in life, it is going to, at some point, bring him the resources necessary. And this falls in line with what you were just explaining, the resources to provide for a family, which a woman would be drawn to having in a long-term partner. So ambition is extremely important. And it doesn't mean that he has to be ambitious to be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. He could be the best school janitor possible. Just as long as he is ambitious about reaching his goal in whatever said goal is, I think that is, it's not only important for him gathering a mate, but it's for his well-being because men are, I'm not a man, but I can only assume men are fulfilled when they have some kind of purpose. And so if they have ambition, then that means that they have an idea in some way about their purpose or at least something that they want to have in life. Would that sound correct?
I think, yes, I agree with that. I think there's levels, there's layers to it, as there are with everything.
Mm-hmm.
So ambition, another, like, so evolutionary lens, we evolved from hunter and gatherers, in my opinion, my belief. We evolved from hunter and gatherer tribes like for thousands and thousands of years. That's what we did before the agricultural revolution. We did not farm. We gained our sustenance through hunting and gathering. What is hunting? Hunting is an ambitious activity. It is going and
Yes.
finding something and bringing and gaining, obtaining control over a thing that is not in your control now. What that thing does is it provides you, like you mentioned, the resources to survive, to sustain your living. So, ambition is something that's been. It's not like the Fortune 500 example. That's so accurate. I'm so glad you said that because that is a new lens that we look at ambition through.
Mm-hmm.
Ambition in its most uh, rugged sense, in its first principle, was resources to survive, which was hunting. So the masculine, the first principle masculine imperative, and I don't know if I would say that the women's first principle, like first feminine imperative, would be to be beautiful, but I do think it is an imperative.
Mm-hmm.
The a masculine imperative of equal standing, in my opinion, would be strength, basically, or I would say strength, but also like protection, because protection, in the word protection, lies provision. So I would say strength because as it is, and this goes back to the attraction. A woman is going to be more attracted to a strong man most of the time, whether or not she's on birth control, I guess.
Yeah.
A strong man, and I'm not talking like a bodybuilder, right? I'm talking about a man that is strong in his will and in his physical body, in his spirit as well. Because what does that extrapolate to? That extrapolates to safety in the external environment in the way of fighting off predators or in enemy tribes, and strong enough to go and acquire resources. So I think that's an interesting That's an interesting question to try to go like tit for tat, the feminine versus masculine imperatives.
Yeah, I'm going to absolutely be thinking deeper on this post conversation. So
Yeah, I think,
amazing.
have you ever heard of the book? I've never read it. Men are from, women are from Venus, men are,
Oh, man.
have you read that?
Many times over, my friend.
Okay, I've never read it. I actually have it on my bookshelf. Is that worth popping open?
It definitely is. It was the first book that I read that really made me not only understand, but appreciate the fact that men and women are supposed to be different.
What do you mean by that?
I mean that if men and women were supposed to act the same, be the same, think the same, then we would just all be a combination of man and woman, whatever that word would be. But we're born into a particular role, particular body, with a particular way of thinking, and the thinking doesn't even have to be brought on by the programming from our parents and schools and society. It's just coming into the suit of being a female or a male. You're gonna think in particular ways and act in particular ways. So that book essentially denotes that men have a certain outlook on life as a whole. It doesn't account for every single individual, but the basis is that they will think a certain way, women will think a certain way, and we're together to co-create our existence. We're not supposed to fight for a position of importance. Each of us has our own importance that we bring to the table to create oneness and wholeness.
I just thought of, I agree with you completely. I just thought of something, and if you'll allow me to air it out, I've never like delineated this thought before, but I want
Yeah.
to try to make sense of it. So you remember how I mentioned Mother Nature and Father God?
Yes.
So when thinking about that through the chaos and order lens, Father God, order, Mother Nature, chaos. Because chaos has kind of a negative connotation as well. It's like, oh, that's chaotic, which is interesting. So
Mm-hmm.
are you following along? Mother Nature, chaos, and then below that you have beauty, right? We just talked about how it's a feminine imperative to be beautiful. And the
Mm-hmm.
example I just thought of. So if you're looking out, and then underneath, so you have Father God, order, or no, order, Father God, strength, or order is another extrapolation of that. So chaos, Mother Nature, beauty. You're looking out over a landscape, a natural landscape. What word would come to mind?
Beautiful.
You would never say, exactly. You would never say, this is an orderly. This is a lot of order, right?
Correct.
So
Correct.
so I don't even know what I'm trying to make sense of, but that just clicked for me. It's like, okay, well, I would never say, look at this orderly landscape. This is
Mm,
beautiful how, or no, this is
yes.
incredible how orderly this natural environment is. The reason I think that's important is because in everything, I believe there is, as you've mentioned, the feminine, the masculine, the order, and the chaos.
Mm,
And there, two dots are in each one. So it's not separate entities. They are a part of the same. So I think that kind of
yeah.
just hammers home the the beauty and the strength conversation. Sorry if I don't know if that makes
No,
any
no,
sense.
no. It makes the way that I'm thinking about it right now is if I am looking out over, let's just say, a mountain range or something, the mountains will be in a particular place, the valley will be in a particular place, the trees. And there is order in that, even though order is objective, right? Like some people, yeah, just the way that we think about order, there is no actual order, but the fact that it's in a particular order means that there is some kind of order. And there is beauty in that.
Absolutely. It's like the mountain, like the physical location of the mountains will not change so that they're in order. But
Mm-hmm.
the chaos that erupts in the the region of the mountains is completely it's chaotic. Like what happens? Like there's different animals doing different things and different plants interacting with different insects and all these things. So it's just an interesting thing to look at. So I believe that once I don't want to speak over you, but once I started to draw the connection between the yin and the yang, the order and the chaos, I started to see it in a lot of things. You can see it in other species of animals, even in individual interactions with human beings. You can see it in conversations that your parents are having and all these things. So it's a really interesting lens to look at a lot of things through. I think it is indicative, or rather, what would be the word? It is a microcosm of a lot of like the greater problems, or not problems, but things that we deal with as humans.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
to change the subject a little bit, we spoke about fasting, and I know you don't want to get too into it. If you could just, so what happened the last 2 weeks prior to this week? What did Peyton Elroy go through?
Okay. So the reason he's saying that I don't want to get too into it is because I haven't shared publicly a lot on it. I've shared the fact that I've done a fast, but not so much the details. And I'm gathering all of my thoughts and the way I want to present it. But
Can I interject real quick?
yeah.
I'm going to have to change the title of this podcast that I had put in. It was going to be like premiere, like first reaction post 14-day fast, like all this crazy stuff. So now it's going to be something. I'm kidding completely. It's going to be something about severe.
Yes. Okay, perfect. That's severe and perfect are my two words. Let's rewind to August 9th of this year. I was driving to the hospital to visit my friend who had experienced, I'm being careful with my words, a traumatic brain injury. And so he'd been in the critical care unit of a hospital for weeks, and then he got transferred and then transferred again. But anyway, that's where I was heading. And I had a seemingly random thought, which no thought is ever random, in my opinion, at this point in my life. But I was driving, and it was 3:25 p.m. And the reason why I know this exact time is because, one, I had texted my friend. And yes, I was texting and driving everybody. So sorry. But anytime I have a profound or significant thought, or even if I think of somebody who I haven't thought of in a while, I will make a point to try to look at the clock to see what time it is, because I really love pattern recognition, and I love to try to decode why I'm having the thoughts that I do at a particular point in time. So I had remembered, okay, I feel like I should do a 7-day fast. Literally, just like that. I'm just driving. I'm not thinking about fasting. I'm not thinking about food. I'm not thinking about anything other than I'm just going to visit my friend. And I don't know what music I was listening to, so I didn't have that stat down. It's totally fine. And so I texted my best friend and I said, hey, I just literally had this thought that I want to do a 7-day fast, and I'm thinking probably September 1st through 7th. Why? Don't know. And I'm being completely serious. Like, these parameters, I just don't know the reason for, but I'm having the thought, and I had told my friend, I do think it would be good to give my body a little bit of a rest, but that was just me trying to put a cerebral thought on why I'm having this epiphany. Like, okay, I just randomly thought I should do a 7-day fast. Why? It was like my intuition or my spirit was guiding me to this, and then my human body was trying to make logical sense of it. Okay, why do I want to do this? Well, there was no logic really behind it, because I didn't have a reason for wanting to do it in the first place. There wasn't something I could think of that made me understand that I should do this. But anyway, I was like, yeah, I'm probably gonna do definitely no food, and I'll probably do liquids while I'm doing it. And now that I'm literally explaining this out loud to you, I'm seeing how I tried to put so much logic in the fast before I even did it. And I think it's because I wanted to have a plan, and I like being very methodical and severe, as we talked about. And if I do something, I'm going to think about it for a trillion different ways before I do it. So I was really trying to have a plan for this when, in hindsight, after having done it, there was not meant to be a plan. So anyway, that was August 9th, and September 1st was about 3 weeks away. So I had time. Just went about my life. And so my fast began on, technically, August, 30 days, September, April, August 31st at 11:56 p.m. was the last time I ingested food. And like I said, I'm always looking at the clock when something important's happening. So I remember I was in my kitchen, I was up late, and sometimes when I do fasting, mind you, I've been fasting since 2016, sometimes I will stay up so I can truly begin the fast at midnight of said day. Other times I've done fasting, it's like, okay, well, if my last meal is at 5 p.m., well, that's when my fast technically starts. But my fast truly began August 31st, 11:56 p.m., and I wanted to be awake when the clock struck 12 because I knew that this was going to be a significant fast. And maybe I'm dramatizing this whole thing, but, it really is what happened. So, great. I was up, all right, fast is starting, I'm going to bed. And I intended to do a 7-day fast, no food, no water, to the best of my ability. Now, a lot of you listening might think, well, that's crazy to have no food for 7 days, and that's even crazier to have no water for 7 days. You can't do that. How do I know this? Well, because I just went on Google and I said, how long can you last without water? And it only said 3 days. So, Peyton, there's no way you did that. That's impossible. Well, here we are. Here we are, baby. So, I, too, had Googled this, and I was like, okay, well, earlier this year in January, I did kind of an involuntary 3-day dry fast. And when I say dry fast, for anyone who doesn't know, that means no food, no water, no nothing. You're just breathing air. This year in January, I had just gone through a long enough period of time where I hadn't eaten for like maybe a day and a half, and I was like, you know what? I should just turn this into a fast. So I literally did 3 days, no food, no water, and the only reason I broke the fast is because I actually had dinner plans with my dad that we had set weeks prior, and I didn't want to skip out just because I was fasting. And that fast was not planned, really, so I felt like, okay, I really don't want to skip out on something with my dad for something that wasn't very intentional to begin with. So I broke the fast when I could have gone 5 days, and I remember, like, when I was about to go to dinner, I was sitting there thinking, dang, like, I'm actually pretty surprised at how easy this is, and I could go another 2 days, no problem. And I'm not saying that with ego or anything. Like, I genuinely could have gone 2 more days at least, no food, no water, just chilling. Mind you, I didn't have much physical energy, so I would have had to just stay home and, like, sleep pretty much to make it. But I still could have done it without much emotional or physical turmoil. So going into this fast, I was like, well, I've done 3 days, no problem. I think 7's pretty doable. And I did have a little bit of fear about post 5 days, because when I did the other fast and I felt like I could easily do 5 days, well, I didn't really think about 7, especially because Google says, oh, you can only do 3 days. And when you look at other things on the internet, it says, oh, like, your body's going to shut down, or your kidneys are going to hurt, all of this. And I will admit there were a couple of moments where I allowed fear to creep in, but ultimately it didn't stop me. So because I had 3 weeks prior to this fast to kind of plan for it, I made sure that I let my brand partnerships know I was going to be unavailable. I let my coaching clients know I'm not going to be available for a week. And part of my fast was beyond just the physical. It was, I'm not calling anyone. I'm not texting anyone. My plan was to not go anywhere, but that didn't really happen. Most of it I followed through on, but I did end up going to a wedding that I had, again, agreed to a long time prior, and I didn't want to skip out on it. So I did go to a wedding during the fast, but ultimately my goal for the fast was to be with myself. And I didn't know why I needed to do this really, because I felt like I've been very much with myself a lot this year. It's been in many ways very lonely year. Even though I've done tons of traveling, I've made probably the most friends I've made in a year ever. It still has felt very lonely for other personal reasons, but I knew I needed to be alone for the fast, so I didn't want to just be away from food and from water. I wanted to be away from the world as much as possible. So I made sure I had zero work to do in my time. The 2 weeks prior was so busy for me. I had a lot of extra work to do, but that just allowed me to have so much ease during the fast and not much to worry about, or at least so I thought. So I spent a lot of time during my fast alone, sleeping in nature. So sleeping separately, and then sleeping in nature separately, and just spending time in nature separately. I didn't talk to anybody besides family I was around, and I was around family because I was a tiny bit fearful for my health. Towards the later end of a week, I was like, well, I can be fine for 3 days without anything, but I don't know what's going to happen with my body, and I'm really going to push for 7 days. Like, I'm, to the best of my ability, I'm trying to do no food, no water, and because I didn't know what that would actually look like, I made a point to be around my family just in case. So if I was being more reckless, and let's use my word severe, I would have just gone out into the wilderness by myself and literally had no contact with any human being. But I felt like that would have been a little bit irresponsible, and that's probably not the way I want to go out in case it was my last week of life. So
No food, no water, just by yourself. Yeah, that doesn't sound too enjoyable.
yeah, well, I didn't want the fast to be enjoyable if it wasn't meant to be enjoyable. If that even makes
I was
sense.
referring to the way that being a way to die. Just to clear.
Okay.
Yeah, because I can't. If you expected a 7 day no water, no fast to be enjoyable, then I'd say I would probably call you delusional.
Yeah. So, yeah, man, I truly come out of that being a different person in many ways. And we've talked about me doing a 2 week fast because at the point of 7 days, no food, no water. I did have a little bit of sea salt, I will say, because my heart was hurting. And like my physical heart was hurting, and I knew that my electrolytes were low. And if I didn't have any salt, I probably would have not made it in the most literal sense. And so, but when I say a little bit of salt, I mean literally a couple of grains. Like, wait, grains of salt?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Not to interrupt, but did you notice that?
Did I notice what?
the salt? Like, was it an immediate thing? You're like, okay, that helps a lot.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, because when my heart was hurting, I felt like short of breath, just very weak, and definitely felt like my body was kind of shutting down a bit. So, but I'm talking like, I'm not like a pinch of salt, like, no, that's way too much. And also, you have to be very careful because if you have too much salt, that off balances your potassium, which your heart needs. So I couldn't have too much salt to bring me back to life, because then my potassium might get way too low and you can have a heart attack from that. Too high potassium and too low potassium, you have a heart attack both ways. So you gotta stay somewhere right in the middle. And
Yeah.
I don't really know what my body did to make that happen, because I just had salt when I was hurting. So I don't know, pulled some potassium out of thin air, but
That's wild.
yeah, I did that. And so at the point of 7 days, well, technically it was the 8th day. So I was like, I'm going to do a full 7 days. So September 8th actually was the point where I was like, okay, well, I'm done. And I got to September 8th and I just felt like a freaking shining star. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, feel so amazing. I got more gas in the tank, as I alluded to on Twitter. I'm going to keep going. And so I was going to go for maybe 9 days because, to be honest, I was thinking about numerology. And this is another area of study that I really love, astrology and numerology. And 9 is a number of completion. And so 9/9 would have been a great day for me to end a fast, and a 9-day fast on 9/9. And I even talked to, because after the 7 days, I was like, okay, I haven't worked. I have so much to catch up on. I literally had over 80 texts to go through. I had 180 something emails. I had all my inboxes, because I had posted on social media. People were messaging me about the fast, and I had so much to tend to. I was like, well, I'm going to continue fasting, but I'm going to get back into work and talking to people, and I just can't like let things pile on. So I had talked to someone that I consider to be a mentor on day 8, and we needed to catch up about some work things anyway, but he was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that you were actually fasting for 7 days. Like, we talked about it a little bit, and I was like, yeah, I'm thinking about ending on 9/9. I think that'd be energetically a good time. And then I got to that 9th day and I was like, oh no, like, if I'm gonna be doing a fast like this, of this caliber, and I'm already this deep, I'm gonna keep going. And I swear to you, I could have done 30 days, no food, no water, no problem. Like, absolutely no problem. If I had no work and I could just lounge around home. Because you can easily do it if you don't have to physically exert yourself very much, but then what's going on with your life at that point? Like, you're just kind of existing and you're not necessarily moving the needle. You are moving the needle spiritually, but physically and with your goals, career, relationships, whatever, no. Everything's kind of at a standstill. So I just took, after 9 days, I was like, I'm going to keep going because I'm not going to do any kind of fast like this again before I have kids. And it's probably going to be at least 2 years until I can do another thing like this. And now, coming off of 2 weeks, I definitely want to do at least a 30 to 40 day fast at some point in time.
Wow.
But anyway, I was like, okay, maybe on day 11, I'll stop. And then I had seen, because I was back online and everything, someone had, 2 people actually, one on Instagram, one on Twitter. They had both said, oh my gosh, I did a 14-day fast before. It was so amazing. And I was like, yep, I'm doing it. 2 weeks, here we go. And so I don't even know who those accounts are. I couldn't tell you, but shout out to them if they end up listening to this. By you sharing
Everyone
that,
listens to this, by the way. So
Yes, they do. Amen. Thank you for the inspiration because, like I had said, on day 8, I had literally decided I could do 30 days if I want to. But I only cut the fast at 14 days because I wanted my life back. That's the only reason I cut it. If I was a stay-at-home girlfriend or wife or something, no kids, just chilling, I probably would have just done the 30 days just to see if I could do it. But I stopped because I wanted to start working out again, which I did work out a little bit during the fast, but it was only on days where I felt energetically like I could, because there were some days where I just felt like I had so much energy. And then there were other days where I felt like a boiled zucchini. Like I just felt very weak and squishy and just like I don't want to do anything. But I wanted to exercise regularly. I wanted to make cooking videos, and I also have brands that I work with, so I needed to honor just getting back into my work. And so yeah, that's really kind of the get down without going too far into detail.
well, firstly, I want to congratulate you. That's spectacular.
Thank you so much.
Because I even mentioned to some people, I'm like, yeah, I'm interviewing this Peyton Elroy. She's, because I called you actually. I said, hey, congrats on your 7-day fast. And you're like, you let me go on. And you're like, yeah, and also I'm actually still fasting. I was like, what? I was like, what? I think that was day
Yes.
11. And you mentioned even then, you're like, I could go on forever. And this is kind of unimportant, but did you go to the wedding like late into the fast?
No, the wedding happened to be on day 2, thankfully.
Okay.
So when
I
I
was gonna
was,
say that's insane.
yeah, when I was there and I wasn't eating or drinking anything at the reception, people are like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm just fasting." They're like, "Oh, you don't want any water?" I'm fasting from water too, man.
And
No,
then
I
everybody's
didn't
like,
want any
okay.
though. But I was like, yeah, I'm on a 7-day fast. They're like, you've been fasting for 7 days and you're here? No, not there yet. But that is the goal. And so if I was on day 7, I would not be here because I would not have expended my energy for a wedding at that point. So if the wedding was anywhere past day 3, I wouldn't have gone. So it just happened to have fallen on the second day. So I went.
It was perfect. So yeah, back to my point about mentioning that to people. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna talk to her next week, and she's like doing or has done a 14-day fast, and without exception, everybody's like, is that healthy?
Yes.
I'm like, I don't know. Well, she's doing it. But I just found it funny because literally everybody was like, wait, what? And so I have a couple of
Yes.
questions. Like, I don't know if you don't want to go into detail with this, then absolutely let me know and we won't. But did you like the number one thing I got from women was like losing weight? And I don't know if you don't want to go into that, totally understand.
No, happy to go into it. So there were, well, first I want to say so many people had also asked me, is that healthy? And I understand it because in society, fasting, number 1, is not normalized. Number 2, to that degree, is not normalized. So I totally understand. Are you asking, was losing weight a goal of this, or you're just
No,
asking about weight loss in general?
no, I'm sure that, I mean, I would assume that losing weight, correct me if I'm wrong on that regard as well. I'm assuming losing weight was not your goal. That's the question that the handful of women that I spoke to about it, that was like their first thing is like, is she going to lose a ton of weight? So my question is like, did you lose a ton of weight?
No, I didn't lose a ton of weight. So, I mean, depends on what they think a ton of weight is. I would say probably like 10 to 12 pounds, maybe. But a lot of it was water. And When I did my 3-day dry fast in January, I actually feel like I lost more weight doing that one than this one. And I didn't weigh myself either time, but just looking at myself. So at about, because there were so many days, I don't have them all very clear, but I remember it was probably between day 3 and 5, one of those days, 3, 4, 5, that I was looking at myself in the mirror. I was like, I haven't lost very much weight, and the water in my body is like stuck in my legs. Because I remember after you get to a certain point, like you've peed, you've pooped, yep, sorry everybody. You've gotten like a lot out of your system, and so my arms, I had seen they were getting more lean. My stomach was super flat, like I couldn't even really push it out with air or anything. It was just really tight, and that was because, well, I had nothing in my system, and also the water had traveled down. Like my face was a lot more slim, but my legs were kind of swollen, and namely my thighs. And I was like, what is going on? Well, I realized that my body was holding on to water for dear life because I wasn't taking any in, and it was retaining water because it was dehydrated, and so it was putting me in survival mode, essentially. The body has its own intelligence and will do absolutely everything it needs to survive. Even if I wasn't feeling bad myself, like I wasn't feeling like it was life or death, my body in its own intelligence probably felt like there's an element of life or death happening right now, and so we're going to hold on to this water. So my body was retaining water for a while, and then I want to say at about the 7-day mark is when I started to see similar results to when I did that 3-day dry fast in January. I was like, okay, the water is definitely coming off, because it's like you don't lose 5 pounds of fat in a matter of days. Like, it's just water that's coming out of me. And I wasn't even peeing that much. That's the thing. It's just like your body, when you breathe air, you excrete water. So just me breathing and existing, and I didn't literally sleep all the time. I was walking around. I ran various errands on some days because I had to. Like, I moved my body a little bit. And as I told you, I worked out sometimes too. So my body was using the water that it had. But I think maybe because of how long I went without water, my body wasn't so ready to give it up, if that makes sense. So I when you think, oh my gosh, somebody like did a 14-day fast, they probably like are so skinny and lost so much weight, and that wasn't really the case for me. My body definitely held on to water, and I don't have a lot of fat to lose as it is. So yeah, I would say anywhere from like 10 to 12 pounds is what I lost. And to
Yeah,
me, that's not a lot. If it was like 20 pounds, I would be like, oh, okay, that's a lot. But 10 to 12 is not that much in my opinion.
yeah, I agree, and it's also like you mentioned, it's probably mostly water. Your body has, not yours, our bodies have such insane, like the intricacies of the protection mechanisms that our bodies put into place is absolutely ridiculous. Because you think about people that have lived, going back to American Indians. I love looking at life through their lens. There were times where they didn't have food, where they were still having to try to hunt and unsuccessfully hunt for 3 or 4 days. They were in the middle of a plain and it didn't rain and there was no streams around, and they had to go actively walk and try to find these. So they were exerting energy, and they were suboptimally nourished, hydrated, all the above. So your body does
Yeah.
incredible things. And whenever we do that second podcast, I want to, if it's all right with you, because hopefully you will have exposed your learnings and your
Yeah.
experience more. I want to dive into that more in the conversation, because like I said, I want to honor your desire to keep everything fresh and release it strategically. That being said, so I don't even know, since we have 2 recordings, I don't even know how long we've gone, but there is So the Tyro experience. First off, you're the first female guest I've had, so thank you for that.
Amazing. Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, it's interesting. I like haven't really thought about it until today, because then I'm like, oh wait, I've literally talked to like 30 dudes. I wonder I wonder what a woman has to say. Um, so that being said, the Tyro experience. Tyro means novice or beginner, and stems from the Latin word Tiro, Tyro. That meant young soldier, a new military recruit, somebody that was just now entering the fight. And so, what it means to me, a Tyro is somebody that is in an arena, as opposed to somebody who's in. I think we're all in arenas, but as opposed to somebody who's not in an arena, or is in the arena but hides, kind of cowers, or tries to run or leave the arena. A Tyro is the person who is in the arena. They stand firm, they grab their sword, and they run towards the middle. And so my question to you, and I like to finish every podcast with this, because it's so, I think it's so indicative of so many things about the person. My question to you is, what arena are you in, and what are you fighting for?
Very fun. I am in the arena of truth, and that is what I'm fighting for.
Do you care to expound?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as we talked about before, I believe that we're all here to just gain more knowledge and consciousness for the God consciousness, or the oneness or the wholeness of all of our existences on this earth and beyond. And so I am fighting for truth in any and all realms. I want to understand truth as much as possible and then share that with people. And truth is alive in every single way you can think of it. Truth can be when we're talking about health, and truth can be when we're talking about politics, or it can be about beauty, or just anything you could possibly think of. I'm fighting for truth and nothing but it.
I love it. That's awesome. That's There's been a couple answers that have been really similar that nobody's said that, but I think that's a worthy cause. I think that's a worthy battle.
Yeah, thank you.
That's
And what are you fighting for?
Oh wow. Nobody's asked me.
Oh, come on
I
now.
guess I should have an answer prepared for that one, considering I've asked it 30 something times. What am I fighting for? I'm gonna take a book out, or a page out of Ryan Ayala's book, because he answered it in a way that I had not heard, and it resonated heavily. I asked him what arena he's fighting for, because and then I said, because what we are fighting for is the fight for our lives, really, because it's what our lives are spent on. And he answered that he's fighting for life. And so I will reiterate that I'm fighting for the experience of living in the most authentic and genuine way. I mean, the actual trying to experience the life that we live, or that I'm living, with as little static or let me reframe that. I'm trying to live the life that I'm living with as much clarity and what's the word? I don't want to say perfection, but with as much clarity as possible, because I think, like, so for health, for example, all these things that we've been mentioning, those are all clouds to me. They cloud like our connection, our wholeness. Which goes back to your answer. This is perfect. Your answer of what is health. Notice I haven't even thought about this really. That, like, health is in your opinion, which I agree with, is like the truest form of oneness and wholeness. I believe all these things that we spoke about, birth control, processed foods, porn, video games, etc. They're all clouds that kind of intersect and interrupt that connection, that wholeness. So I'm fighting to
Yes.
live my life with as little of that as possible and as much of that clarity and that wholeness.
Beautiful. And
Wow.
you've created a podcast that continues to exemplify that. So congratulations.
Thank you very much. And thank you for coming on, Peyton. I really, really appreciate it.
Oh, you're so welcome. I look forward to the next conversation because we got a lot more to cover, my friend.
Yeah. Hopefully this time I won't be staring at a blank screen with a P in the middle.
Yes, I'll be wearing a different outfit then for sure.
Right on. Alrighty. Have a good one.
Have a beautiful day. Thank you.
And with that, I hope y'all enjoyed the conversation with Peyton. That was a fun conversation to be a part of. We kind of covered a little bit of everything, spiritual health, a lot of good stuff that Peyton brought up. I'm really excited to hopefully have another conversation with her to dive into her fast experience a little bit more, because that's one of the most incredible things I've heard in a long time. But I hope y'all enjoyed it. I hope y'all find some value in it. Until next time, stand firm in the arena.